Hi there. So even as I, go to talk about this topic, everything in me feels so conceited to be like, "No, Hale, you are not the rule. You're the exception." Like, sure. That's that's the voice I've decided that my negative Nancy brain has right now. Um and for a really long time I would tell myself that like I am the rule, not the exception. And the problem with that is that it makes me think of how if you're ever listening to like business advice, you might hear how people will say things like, "Oh, well, you shouldn't follow what you if you follow what everybody else does, then you will get what everybody else has." And considering like, most people are like depressed, broke and anxious, is that really what you want? And while I do go through my periods where I'm depressed, broke and anxious, um I overall I have proven time and time again that I am not the rule, that I am the exception. And yet I have this narrative in my head that I have had for way too long, all because of that dang movie. He's just not that into you. Justin Long says to Jennifer Goodwin, at some point, like when the whole premise is like, she's into some guy and she's like, well, what if he actually is into me, but like blah, blah, blah. And like, but blank, like I had a friend who did X, Y, and Z. And then like, he ended up actually eventually proposing to her and now they're happily married with like 3 kids or whatever, blah, blah. And then like Justin Long's like, you're the rule, not the exception. I don't know why, but that like, ugh, straight to the heart, one line. And it's actually like therapeutic to be reclaiming that after such a long narrative in my brain. Because everything that I do, I prove that I am the exception, not the rule. Like when whenever I think about like when I worked at the law firm and I like gave my notice. It's like a 300 plus person law firm, right? And they had like multiple offices across a few different states, all that jazz. It's not like it was like a small mom and pop operation. And when I gave my notice, first of all, my boss, bless his heart, as soon as I told him, like I like closed the door and he was like, "Oh no." And then I told him like, this is me like giving my notice and he was like, "Oh God." And then he was like, "What if I gave you more money?" And I said, "I want this other position." He was like, "What if I gave you more vacation?" I was like, "I want this other position." He was like, "What if I paid for your lunch every day?" And I said, "I want this other position." And he was like, "Well, at least I can say that I tried." And so I gave him my notice. And the thing you need to know about this law firm is that the COO, like he and I had a good relationship. In another video I mentioned, I was in regular meetings with him and like some of the other department heads. And he had this meeting that was like an all hands meeting. They might still have it. That was very much like it's his baby, right? Like when he came on board, like this was his doing. He wanted everybody on the same page, all of that jazz. And I gave my notice. Like I sent my email with the notice while that meeting was going on. And so pretty much everybody except my team was at that meeting. And that's because my boss technically did not work for the law firm. He worked for the title company that was under the same umbrella. It was an interesting structure. But because of that, like my boss was like, well, if you don't think that this is like a good enough use of your team's time to like for them to stop working to do it, then like you don't have to tell them to do it. So I made it optional for my team. And like most of us would just end up like calling in from our desk and just like, listening to whatever was being shared. And I ended up sending the email to like HR and to my boss after I had discussed it with my boss in person, of course. But I sent that email during that all hands meeting. And even like as soon as the COO got back to his office, a friend of mine who eventually would take over my team, she immediately like went into his office to discuss it, and before she could even say anything, he was like, "I know, I'm trying to figure out if we can keep her." like, and as soon as like the head of HR, not even just like the normal HR person who does the exit interviews, as soon as the head of HR got back from that meeting, he called me down to his office he was like, I understand that like that, your boss has tried everything to like keep you, so I understand that your decision is like made. I'm just trying to understand like, kind of like what we did basically. And like I'm at like a 300 person plus company, and I have like the head of HR calling me down and like the COO freaking out about me leaving. That's not that is not rule behavior. That is exception behavior. And even when I eventually like worked at my when I was working as a product manager, right? I started there in April, and then in December I had my first like employee review, and you have to do like a self review, right? And I felt very bad because most of my coworkers were very stressed, and so I thought that that meant like, since I'm not stressed, I must not be taking on my fair share of the work. Like, that is not fair to them. And I said that during my self assessment for that review. And my boss was like, I'm very surprised by this because you do already have your fair share of requirements. And I was like, okay. And then over the next like 8-9 months, while like before I ended up eventually leaving there, not only was I like a year ahead on my normal requirements, but I took on a new project where we were designing a essentially like a lot of our clients were salon and spa companies, and so if they needed to like order hair extensions or order lashes, order things like that, I was helping develop a mail order system. So like I had to create all the mock-ups for it, do all the technical writing for like all the different aspects of it, conduct interviews with like different salon and spa owners to kind of understand better like what their flow would look like, and to show them the mock-ups and then tweak accordingly. Did that. We were launching a new like payment processing, like we were going to handle the payment processing. I handled the design of that, all on top of my normal work. I was taking on other people's work. And still, by the time I left, I was over a year ahead on all of these things, and all of these projects had already been like buttoned up, or they were at least buttoned up where if another person came in, they would just need to like tweak. It wouldn't be like oh, you need to overhaul everything type of energy. And again, like I was still in the headspace of like me being the rule, not the exception. And changing that narrative, changing it now, forever. And so, because I like to end with questions, what narrative do you have that does not serve you? And how can you change it? Because let me tell you, every time I am talking to a client, there's so many narratives that we all have that do not serve us whatsoever. And I'm changing those narratives, and you should too. So, have a great day.